The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie. We can watch it all develop. Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello and welcome to Triple Feature, a Radulich and Broadcasting Network premiere podcast. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And joining me tonight first, and I'm going to say her first because she got here first, ladies and gentlemen, from Tate FX and any other project she's doing, it's Shay Tate. How do you do, madam?
I am doing pretty damn good. How are you doing?
Oh, I could complain, but who would care? No, I'm doing all right. And because this is the kickoff to the 2025 Black History Month celebration here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, a yearly celebration of Black cinema, ladies and gentlemen, the ally of the Black community, transracial friend of yours and mine, good to his mother, a pretty cool fruit who really knows where his towel's at, Mr. Enthusiasm. He's from the cheap seats. he's the Black Irishman. Ladies and gentlemen, he's calling himself the Kid tonight. Jason Teasley, how do you do, sir?
I don't know if that intro got any longer that I'll be able to stay awake, but but I'm doing good. I mean, it's kick off the Black History Month, and what a way are we going to do it than three boring ass movies?
I do enjoy your enthusiasm. It's a wonder we don't record every single week. No, Jason and I do this every year. We usually do 3 or 4 shows, sometimes more than that. Like, we've really packed these in. In the month of February, we do either triple features on Long Road to Ruins that celebrate Black cinema. We have looked at the highs and lows of blaxploitation. We have looked at the highs and lows of the urban cinema, like Boys in the Hood, Menace Society, things like that. We've done actor focuses for like Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor. What else did we do?
We typically do musical.
I'm getting there. I just needed to catch everybody up. So that's what we do here. We've got a loaded month for you this month, and we are kicking things off with. So I wanted to do this last year. I think I don't remember why I wanted to do The Wiz and what we attached it to. I think I had started on I think I had started on Black musicals last year, and that got turned into the director focus. That was the guy who did Hustle and Flow. My Name is Dolomite and Black Snake Moan. So we kicked The Wiz into this year, and I was like, okay, well, if we're gonna do Black musicals, starting with The Wiz, then we also have to do Purple Rain featuring Prince. Really want a spectacular. The album, the soundtrack to that movie is one of the best. And then you had suggested Dreamgirls, which why exactly did you suggest Dreamgirls, Jason?
Because we needed a third, and at that time, it crossed my mind as being one of the most popular musicals to focus on Black history. So we slid it in there. I mean, sometimes these things just kind of happen and fall into our laps, and I just randomly spurt shit out. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Last year we did the Whitney Houston biopic, the Tina Turner biopic, and then we ended things, unfortunately, according to you, with the Aretha Franklin one. So I am accidentally falling ass backwards into getting into Jennifer Hudson's filmography. Like we keep accidentally reviewing her movies for some reason. I'm becoming an accidental expert in Jennifer Hudson movies.
Yeah, I mean, it could be worse. I mean, we could accidentally fall ass backwards into worse things. I don't know how it's possible, but
you should see the lineup for next year. Shay,
uh,
you chose to be here tonight. Now, I think you initially had just wanted to come on for The Wiz, and because this is triple feature, you get roped into doing two other movies. So, you want to give me the 50 words or less here on your desire to talk about The Wiz publicly, and then what being forced to do these other movies has done to you?
So yeah, I really did want to come on for The Wiz. The Wiz is one of my favorite interpretations of the Wizard of Oz story. It is also a highly theatrical filming. It's actually made it onto Broadway. It's been a very big Broadway show for a good long while. NBC years back actually did a filming of the Broadway show, which I absolutely loved. It's got a fantastic soundtrack, and with my theatrical, specifically musical theater background, I just really felt that I could talk about this, and I love this movie.
That's great. That'll be a
well,
nice counterbalance to Jason, who
yes.
who can't wait to give it the Oz treatment, as near as I can tell.
No, well, I mean, yeah, I'll go ahead and preface this. Please don't hate me after we get done.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was a complete thought or not. I'm going to start getting into
Do I have any complete thoughts, Mark?
not even a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to get into The Wiz full on in just a minute, but you promised me, you swore to me, you said you'd be there for Wicked, and then you and 87 other people did not make that show, and you left me alone in a dark alley with Alexis and Robert. So I do want to take a minute and ask you what I would have asked you on the Wicked review. 50 words. What's your relationship to the Wizard of Oz? Since you didn't get a chance to talk about Wicked, what'd you think of that? Just all things, not you, Jason. Well, I'm talking to Shay here. Shut up. All things Wicked, Wizard of Oz. Go.
So I have a little bit of tenuous relationship with the Wizard of Oz. I grew up in Kansas, and it was absolutely fucking everywhere, to the point where I'm really fucking sick of the Wizard of Oz unless it's a really strange retelling of it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I remember we watched that every single year at the end of the year until I was in like 8th grade.
Isn't it like a Thanksgiving staple?
I don't know about Thanksgiving, but
It
we
used
did
to
it
be.
every single year.
Yeah, I just really quick, I'm going to let you keep going with your spiel because I hate, I don't want to interrupt you and I hate when other people do it. But Robert Winfrey, way back in the old timey times, did an Everyone Loves a Bad Guy on The Wizard of Oz, and I think specifically mentioned it was a Thanksgiving tradition that it would be aired on terrestrial television. Right, Jason? Yes or no?
Yeah, it was. I think TNT would always air it on Thanksgiving night.
Okay, back to you, Shay.
But yeah, I don't know about Thanksgiving. Everyone I knew had cassette tapes of The Wizard of Oz that were so overplayed that there were parts of them that didn't work. And it just, I got to a point very early in my life where I was just really sick of it. Until I found some of these stranger, different interpretations of the story. And I really fell in love with The Wiz. Tin Man is actually one of my more preferred.
That was the sci-fi kind of action adventure show, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where, there's like a revolution. It's like a communist style revolution going on in Oz, being led by the Tin Man, who's kind of like a general. Because I think I watched that.
Yeah. So the Tin Man actually used to be a cop in that one. And he had basically gotten frozen until Dorothy's granddaughter, I think.
Right.
Ended up getting splatted into the OZ.
Yes.
It was just it was very interesting, and it's been a little while since I've seen that version, so I'm not 100% sure if I loved it because it was good, or if it was because I am platonically in love with Alan Cummings.
Fair enough. Real fast, what'd you think of Wicked?
I have still not seen the movie.
Oh, okay.
I have seen a version of the stage show, and it's interesting. It's a very modern theater interpretation. Every like photograph and everything I've seen of the stage show has been absolutely gorgeous. The film looks like it is absolutely gorgeous. It's got just the right mix of CG use to make it seem very fantastical, along with the practical sets that make it feel very like big Broadway.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mentioned this when we did the Wicked show. I've seen it on Broadway with Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth, and I saw it back when they were making contemporaneous jokes about George Bush. So there's that, and weapons of mass destruction. Jason, before I once again took you hostage and into a dark alley and made you watch films against your will, which crushed your soul and shrunk your penis, have you ever seen The Wiz?
Yeah, I watched it. The first time I ever seen The Wiz, I was really young. It was like, it came on, I think I might have watched it on like HBO or something the very first time I seen it. And then I revisited when I was in college in a film appreciation class.
Did you really?
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about why it was studied in that class. But I really think that you took this as just another reason to try to force your way in to talk about the TV show Oz and not the actual Wizard of Oz.
You know what I've always wondered.
Yeah, I mean, I figure we'll have some kind of reference there.
Yeah.
And then when you heard The Wiz, you was thinking about, the shower scenes of
Sure.
Their Force at Oz.
Yeah, this conversation's about to get real weird.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Shay, that we roped you into this, that things will get really weird.
And once again, Shay's in a threesome she didn't want to be in.
Yeah. And Mark's always the pivot man. Anyway, yeah, we studied this. We actually studied this in the film appreciation class. I'm going to say I was at West Virginia State back in about 2003, 2004-ish. And it was studied for a lot of the reasons that mean you do this show. That really the premise that we started Black History is because of blaxploitation and how it was interpreted. It had a good premise, but it was poorly executed. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All right, so let's get into what this actually is. I've told you before, and Shay, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but for the first 12 years of my life, I was like the only white kid in my school. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and I was immersed in the culture of my neighborhood. So things like The Wiz, which The Wiz came out, I'll go through the demographic information in just a second. It comes out in 1978. I'm 2 at the time. So playing The Wiz at school, on the times that they would play a movie for the class or play something in, your chorus class or something like that, was not uncommon, especially for the school that I went to. So I almost guarantee you the first time I ever saw The Wiz was in elementary school. I probably caught a viewing of it on TV, and then I haven't watched, until I played it for my kids and my girlfriend, I have not watched this thing in decades. And boy, was the playing this for especially my son, who is turned into young Robert Winfrey, and like young Sheldon. It was over. He just got up and declared that it was a crime against cinema, and that these were Lovecraftian monsters, and that I'd scarred him for life. And I told him to take a Xanax. So needless to say, this is quite the visual experience. So let's get into it. The Wiz is a 1978 American musical fantasy adventure film directed by Sidney Lumet, adapted from, as Shay said, the 1974 Broadway musical. It is a reimagining, obviously, of the Wizard of Oz novel by L. Frank Baum with an African-American cast. Dorothy is a 24-year-old teacher from Harlem. She is magically transported to the urban fantasy land of Oz, and on her travels, she seeks help from the mysterious Wiz, who is played by the late, great, amazing treasure of American cinema and culture, Richard Pryor. She befriends the Scarecrow, who is played by the late pop star Michael Jackson, a robot Tin Man, who is played by the ever hilarious Nipsey Russell, and the Cowardly Lion, who is played by Ted Ross. So there's not much derivation in terms of plot here. Dorothy, the thing starts at, I think it's Thanksgiving, and 87 people show up to this one Harlem flat to have Thanksgiving dinner. And Dorothy, who's played by Diana Ross, who is supposed to be 24, she looks 54, and she is just over it. she's not into this at all, and neither is the dog. So Toto fucks off and runs into the snow, and Diana Ross follows him into the snow, and a magical snowy tornado shows up in Harlem, sure, and transports her to the land of Oz. Jonas's headcanon with that was she was actually frozen in the snow and dying of hypothermia this entire time, and this is all a hallucination, which I would absolutely buy. So anyway, she shows up in Munchkin Land. The Good Witch says, "You've killed the Wicked Witch of the East, and here's magic slippers. They are white, not ruby in this particular case." And she is sent hither and forth to Oz by following the yellow brick road, and everywhere is. And I really, when I'm done with the plot synopsis and I go to you, Shay, I just love for you to speak endlessly about the set design. But everywhere is urban blight, because apparently that is the authentic African American experience of which this is based on. Just urban blight and garbage everywhere and broken streets and dreams. So she follows the yellow brick road. She meets Michael Jackson, who is being taunted by the crows from Dumbo. And he is stuck on a pole, and she gets him off of there, and they now become fast friends. They travel forth. They meet the Tin Woodsman. They do the oil can bit. So he follows them. They show up to what looks like museum steps, and there are cement lions there. And of course, our Cowardly Lion pops out of one, and he tries to scare him off, and it does not work. And eventually, they determine that, oh, he's the Cowardly Lion. They eventually get to Oz. They meet Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor says, "Go kill the Wicked Witch of the West," who we have not met yet, and this is one of my major criticisms of this film, but we'll get there. He says, "Hey, there's a Wicked Witch of the West. You done killed the Wicked Witch of the East. Now go kill her sister. That'll make everything all right." So they do, and much like the Judy Garland movie, they use water to kill her. In this particular case, Scarecrow tells Dorothy, "Why don't you just turn the sprinkler system on?" Perfect. So they melt the witch. They go back to Oz. They determine that Richard Pryor's wizard is actually a halfway corrupted politician who flew to Oz in an air balloon, just like his predecessor. And the Wicked Witch of the East, or rather the Good Witch of the East, one more time, the Good Witch of the North shows up and says, "Hey, if you'd only believe in yourself, you could go home, and you've had the power all along, Dorothy." And she says, "Oh, alrighty." Then she starts to think of home, and she wakes up from her hypothermia and runs into the house, following Toto once again. And that is The Wiz. I have thoughts, but I want to go to you first, Shay. You wanted to be here. This is your moment. Hit it, girl. What did you think of this interpretation of The Wiz?
I loved it. It is a really simple story. It's a little bit of an odd story, but I think that fits in really well with the dreamscape that was kind of presented in the original film Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is Dorothy. The entire time Dorothy thinks that this is a dream, and none of this stuff is supposed to make sense, so she just kind of goes along with it. And I
Yeah, it's
think
like a
as far as,
Wonderland vibe, like an Alice in
yeah,
Wonderland
a
vibe.
little bit of a Wonderland vibe. And I think the plot line works really well for it. But I also don't think that the plot line is really the focus of this film. This is very much a Broadway show. This entire thing is about spectacle. It is about the music. It is about the dancing. It is about the singing. And on that point, it works really well. And it's honestly, it is one of the better interpretations from live theater to film. A lot of the time, production companies will have a little bit of a hard time transferring live theater into film.
Cats.
Yes, that is a perfect example of how not to do that. But there's a lot of stuff that does go into transferring a live theatrical production into a film. A lot of it is songs have to be cut out for time. There has to be a translation of the set pieces, because a lot of the time in theater, where the set pieces are moving and what direction they're moving will actually be part of either the song or the theme, or will be a really big transitional piece in the show itself. And transferring that into a film where you don't have that very set stage with a static viewpoint 100% of the time is very difficult. And I think they did this really well, because they actually did, NBC did a filming of the live show fairly recently. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a pretty decent job translating the transitions, all of the set pieces moving and stuff like that into film when they were doing this film. They also did a really fantastic job with the sets and the costumes for everyone. It is a very it's a very gritty, very community theater style of production that firmly sets itself in Fantasyland. A lot of the costumes look like they were literal trash that was picked up and thrown onto these characters that were from this Fantasyland. And it's all very cohesive. The set design is it's a very bright and colorful, very vaudevillian and almost German expressionist style, with towering buildings and at the same time very claustrophobic at times looking sets, and everything looks cobbled together. It's kind of steampunk before steampunk, especially with the
I would
Wicked
100%
Witches
agree with that.
sweatshop.
This definitely feels like I struggle with the idea that this is the authentic Black experience, and going, oh, it's urban. It definitely felt more steampunk than anything else.
Yeah, and I don't have any idea of how close it is to an authentic Black experience, but it's definitely a very different type of experience than what someone like I would come up with, having grown up in Kansas.
Sure.
Because my idea of Wizard of Oz, or my original idea of Wizard of Oz, was big, sprawling, sets that have almost nothing in it, a few clumps of trees over here, and valleys and flat land, because that's what
Yeah, let's
Kansas
say
is.
amber
There's
waves of
almost
grain.
nothing in Kansas.
Isn't that all of Kansas? Amber waves of grain and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Yep. There's not a lot in Kansas. If you drive through Kansas, it is wheat fields everywhere. Oh, there's a small clump of trees. Wheat fields everywhere.
Okay.
But I really did like this very different interpretation
Mm-hmm.
Of the roads and of the sets, and just how different and how compact it was, and And even the changes to who the Wicked Witch and the Wizard were, I thought they were really good, very different interpretations from what I had originally seen.
Okay. Me cut in here, and then I'll go to you, Jason. The thing that has always stuck with me about this, the thing that I remembered was "Ease on Down the Road." It is easily the most standout, best song in this entire piece. To the point that I, without even thinking necessarily about the whiz, I will, when I need people to move fast, or I'm addressing walking of any kind, I like, let's go ease on down the road. It has been said that in the readings that I've done that the most standout performer in this and the best performance is Michael Jackson, and I would heartily agree with that. Michael Jackson kind of runs away with this, which is weird because he's not clearly playing a bombastic character. He's playing a very kind of shy, almost mumbly at times character, but Michael Jackson, first of all, has charisma for days, or had charisma for days, especially back then. This is the off the wall Thriller era. Those are two different albums, people. Know your history. And back then, he really did, like, he had a charisma that was hard to put a finger on, and it comes through here in his performance. And I honestly would have rather watched him than anybody else in the movie. That said, I struggled with watching it because I was really watching it with a critical eye, and I don't necessarily want to like just tear it to pieces because there's some good things about it and there's some not good things about it. Here are the not good things. Film is not the stage. The stage is not film. The stage is naturally dark. Theaters are dark. And you have to light things a certain way, but you cannot get the creeping darkness of theater is ever omnipresent. And film, you don't have to deal with that. You can have it as dark or as light as you want. You can change the entire world. You can make it look like James Cameron's or Avatar, where everything is blue. You can do all kinds of shit. And here, I understand. If you compare it to Wicked, just to do an apples to apples comparison ish, Wicked is a film. It's a musical film, but it's a film. Those are well lit sets. The production design is definitely Oscar worthy. It is bright. It is colorful. It is otherworldly. It really takes you there. Here, because everything is so goddamn dark. Like when she gets to Munchkinland, by comparison to when Judy Garland gets to Munchkinland and they do the transition from, Game Boy sepia tone to, color, it has the effect of transporting the audience as it should. That's what was in its intent. And Munchkinland, while on practical sets and everything else, if you've ever seen any like the behind the scenes stuff from The Wizard of Oz, is so goddamn bright and colorful. And here, I laughed my ass off when she shows up in Munchkinland because the first thing she does is hits a neon sign like goddamn Superman in Oz, Superman in Zod from Superman 2, hitting the Pepsi sign. I was like, what the fuck? Like, what? Why that choice? And then everything in like Munchkinland is so goddamn dark. And then it kind of just stays that way through most of the film. As if to say, like, we just want you to never forget this was a stage musical. Like, we got it. We're good. Like, I don't need oppressive darkness in this movie. Diana Ross looks like they never yelled cut to her, and she didn't sleep through the entire filming of this thing. She looks tired. Diana Ross is a pretty woman and very talented, and here she looked like she was a goddamn hostage. Not to mention the fact that every time, like, I remember thinking to myself, like, I remembered the song Ease on Down the Road. I never remembered the dance movement. And watching it at almost 50 years old, I'm looking at Diana Ross and like, was her direction you walk like Kermit the Frog? She's doing like this shit. like what is she, a bushwhacker from the WWF days? What the hell are you doing, Diana Ross? That woman has no bones, Jason. None. She has no skeleton at all. She is all rubber. And she was doing Ease on Down the Road. And every time they like went to her and she was doing, she was kind of like marching, dancing. She looked ridiculous.
She looked like Gumby.
Yeah, she looked like she was made of rubber. And for whatever reason, and Shay, I don't know if you have an opinion on this at all, the fucking dress they put her in. You know, like, I don't know why they consciously put her in what appeared to be a rag, like just the drabbest dress ever. But that's choice. And again, if you're trying to say something about, you know, black people in this country, and you know, it's supposed to be interpreted in all facets of this movie, I guess that's a choice too. But again, I looked at that and I went, why would you do this? Why it almost looked like they sandbagged Diana Ross in the production of this versus everybody else.
So I think that dress was also supposed to be a lot more of a contrast between between who Dorothy was and what was going on in the Land of Oz.
Sure.
Because it did look a lot more like it was a very comfortable, very practical dress.
Yeah.
That she would have been wearing like while she was getting ready for the party before she put her actual party clothes on. And I think it was really supposed to contrast with how like big and gaudy, like especially how big and gaudy the witch's outfit was.
Oh my god!
Oh my god, I fucking love the witch's
what
outfit.
What an amazing costume that is! That dress she's wearing.
Oh yeah, it is. It is fantastic. That is like Ursula levels of drag baubles.
It was awesome. That'll be the last thing I say on this because I don't want to be on this forever. And I want Jason to have his piece when we move on to Purple Rain. But if you go back to the way the MGM Judy Garland film is structured, the Wicked Witch shows up in Munchkinland and presents herself as a threat. When they meet the Scarecrow, she's back again. When they meet the Tin Woodsman, she's back again. She shows up not during the bit with the Cowardly Lion, but shortly after they're in the poppy field, and that is one of her obstacles she throws at them. So by the time they get to the wizard, and the wizard's like, I need you to kill her. Just kill her dead. Bring her back the broom, and then I'll give everybody what they want, like Santa Claus, and send you home. You are, as an audience member, understanding what kind of threat this woman is and why the wizard would want her dead. You don't get introduced to the witch until they show up at her sweatshop, which I think is hilarious, by the way. And they do a song and a dance number where you, as an audience member, associate her with being evil because she's running a sweatshop. Not because of anything else happening in this movie, but because sweatshops are bad. Again, an odd interpretation in this movie. And then they get there and she's doing evil stuff and they deal with it. And and the Scarecrow says, turn on the sprinkler system, see what happens. And they melt her. But I was like,
yeah, and I do think that some of that was stuff that was actually cut from the musical for time. Because I do remember a little bit more about the Wicked Witch from the musical before they get to the sweatshop.
Yeah, maybe get to Oz faster then and cut that instead of what they did with the witch.
Yeah, like I think she swoops in and does a couple of really shitty things during the musical and like fucks with the Scarecrow and the lion a little bit more than she does in the movie.
Which is what was needed here. So that was it. I mean, it's not that I don't like The Wiz. I'm not quite where my son is, where I think this is an abomination. There are some very dated things about it. There are some very hilariously interesting choices. And again, I was reading the Wikipedia page on this, and there was a lot of like allusions to, well, this speaks to the Black experience because these are interpretations that deal with slavery. And I'm like, they're the exact same thing that happened in the Judy Garland version, but those aren't associated with slavery. So I think there's weird projection going on in the interpretations of it. But like, overall, I think it's adorable. Weird, adorable, kind of a time capsule of its time. Jason, what did you think of The Wiz?
As a poor black man from the hills of West Virginia,
I
thought I did like it. There was some, like you said, there were some aspects I did like. I mean, like the Michael Jackson performance was great, even though that he was almost not in the movie, because Diana Ross said, "If I'm not in the movie, you're not going to have Michael Jackson." And Berry Gordy was like, "Okay, we'll appease you," because they was together at the time. To appease you, that I will give you the role of Dorothy if you can help secure Michael Jackson for the role of Scarecrow, which is really interesting in how deals were done then. But I really feel that this is a very bright light on the reason why some musicals should not be turned into film. Um, because I think they tried to go overboard with a lot of the interpretations, and sometimes less is more. And in this case, I think that they try to do too much grandeur and try to make it too over the top. I think that if they would have kept it like simple and the stage show, which I actually like plays, a little known fact. But I actually like going to a theater and watching a play because of the intimacy, you do see like the set pieces moving and everything, the transitions. And I really think that they not only took me out of it for the over the top, trying to be something that was more visually appeasing than I totally missed that. But I
Don't
think
worry
that
about it.
it took me out of it there, and I feel
Mhm.
like when we studied this in film class, it was from the scope of this is a black exploitation of the Wizard of Oz,
Mhm.
uh, and my film professor was like, this is basically them trying to take a classic movie and fit it into a narrative that plays to a niche audience.
Right.
Um, and that's where we studied it from
Can I
because
let me throw
you
a
do have
contrast at you, Jason? You and I talked
no,
about okay. You and I talked about Blackula and how
that was a great
Blackula at
movie.
first, yeah, well, that's my point. Blackula at first blush seems like okay, you've taken the classic Dracula story and just blacked it up, and like that wasn't our experience with Blackula. There were some stuff. Some of it was a little bit like that, but for the most part, it was just another interpretation of Dracula, and it didn't necessarily rest on the racial components, unlike this seems to.
Yeah, I think with the difference with Blackula is Blackula didn't take itself too seriously. This tried to take itself way too serious
Okay.
and tried to force home that it could be um, the plight of the black man. Which I mean, it's fine and that's all fine and good, but you could have done. There was a lot of choices made here that could have went a different direction. If you went a different direction, it would have worked out a little bit better. Most notably, all of the scarecrows were certainly a choice. Um,
I was
they,
really waiting for one of them to go, I see the house fly.
yeah, I mean, I think some of the South called and got the crows back um, after this movie. I think that's where they actually got the narrative for how the crows should act. I was waiting for somebody to break out in the zippity doo dah.
And walked Uncle Remus for no apparent reason.
Yeah, Uncle Remus. As we'll throw this back to our famous thing. Uncle Remus come across and just says message, and
Welcome to Black History Month on the Radulich Broadcasting
Yeah.
Network, Shay.
where everything always ties back to Keenan Ivory Wayans and Don't Be a Menace to Society while drinking your juice in the hood.
Yeah, she's never seen it.
Yeah, I highly recommend. Where he just shows up and says message anytime if something important comes on screen. But yeah, I mean, I think the characters themselves, I don't think that it was bad. I think the Diana Ross choice was a swing and a miss. I think they could have got somebody. I think she let her star power kind of shoehorn her into this movie.
I don't know if the timing would have worked out because I don't remember when Whitney Houston became a thing. But imagine Whitney Houston in The Wiz
Oh
at
yeah,
that time.
yeah. I mean, even somebody like you could have trying to think somebody else that may have fit that
Early
back in that
'80s
era.
black pop star. Oof. Um.
Yeah, I mean, you would have had Whitney.
hmm
Whitney
And
would have been probably a little
I was
too
going. There
young.
was Whitney and Whitney because everybody
Yeah.
else would have been better choices for the Wicked Witch of the West, like Tina Turner or Shaka Khan or somebody. Like I don't want to see
Well, I
them
mean,
as
I don't know.
Dorothy.
Tina Turner might have worked in this. Could have been. I
As
mean, that would have
Dorothy?
been. Yeah, I think that would have been. I think it would have been better than a 33-year-old Diana Ross.
Okay, you keep going. I'm gonna ask my girlfriend what she thinks, and by my girlfriend I mean ChatGPT. I've many girlfriends.
All right, but I love my favorite thing outside of anything involving Michael Jackson was the introduction of the Tin Man
hmm
because the faces
Oh,
were something.
Nipsey Russell is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a very physical comedy person, and the way he pulled off the Tin Man was something to to be appreciated. I don't think that he got enough credit for the role, but yeah, it was like it just took me out of it. I would have preferred. I would prefer seeing the interpretation on like a Broadway or a more intimate theater versus the over the top theatrical.
So some of the names that they threw out here, and the only one I even recognize is Irene Cara. That would have been fantastic. Dude, gained fame in the late '70s and early '80s with fame in Flashdance. Now we're talking.
No, I tell you who we should have done. We should have done Jackie Brown.
Okay.
Jackie Brown.
All right. Anything else? Let me go over to Shay
No,
real
I
quick.
mean,
Anything else, Shay? I'm going to give you the final word here on the Wiz, and then we'll move on.
Not really. I mean, I really would have loved to have seen this live in theater. But I do think that things like this are important, even though they might have not been done the greatest, because it does give exposure to musicals, especially musicals, for people who don't necessarily live in areas where you can get access to that. I
hmm
lived in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, until I was 18. The only musicals I got to see were the ones that came out on DVD. And one time when I was 16, I got to go see Les Mis live.
How many
Um,
times were you shown Oklahoma before you finally threatened violence against your family?
I did not have to watch Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
My mom really loved horror movies, so any of the musicals aside from Wizard of Oz
hmm
that I experienced entirely because I wanted to.
Oh, good for you. How about Little Shop of Horrors?
Uh,
When was the first
I
time you saw
loved it.
since you're a horror person and mom was a horror person, when was your first exposure to the Little Shop?
I was probably so that one kind of depends. I actually saw the original Little Shop of Horrors, the non-musical one from the 1950s, on Turner Classic Music Movies when I was 7 or 8.
Nice.
And then I saw the musical a little while later. I think it was around 10, 12 years old.
hmm
And I was already head deep into loving musicals, so I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I think I showed Lily Little Shop of Horrors probably when she was about that same age as you, but the musical version, because it's
Yeah.
the only version of it that I was even aware of until all of my friends started yelling at me about the original one. So, moving on. uh, we are now going to talk about Purple Rain. Oh, Jason, Purple Rain,
don't give me my
Purple
feels.
Rain. Purple Rain. I love Prince. Have I told you how much I love Prince? I love Prince so much. How much do I love Prince? And when he died, I stopped everything, like the presses, and we did an entire Metal Hammer of Doom on Prince's career. I don't even remember who. It had to have been Pat that was on that show. It was me, Pat, and God only knows.
Oh yeah, Pat would have had to been on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like
totally
there was a good
80s.
person. Maybe it was Melissa. Maybe it was somebody else. But I know she was on for the Bowie show with him. But which makes sense. She was a huge Bowie fan. But yeah, when Prince passed away, man, I immediately took to Blog Talk Radio, and we did a whole thing. We played his music. Growing up as a kid in the hood of Uniondale, Prince was like, I think I appreciated Prince more than I did Michael Jackson. They were kind of 1A, 1B for me. And that wasn't either directly rock and roll or directly rap. I have always loved his music, and I was sad when he was one of the few people who, I was sad when he passed away. I thought that the world had lost a truly unique talent. I never quite understood the changing of the name stuff, but monumentally talented stars, in bubbles of yes men will do weird things like change their name to a symbol. But I didn't hold that against them. Let me go over to you first, Jason. Tell me how much you love Prince and everything he's ever done.
Oh, I mean, I'm a huge Prince fan. And just learning more about him post-mortem was something I thrived on. I mean, like I said, when Prince died, I thought it was like a part of my childhood had died.
Like God, it when the doves cry.
Yeah, I mean, it made the doves cry. I took on my Raspberry Beret.
Yes.
The kind you buy at the secondhand store.
That's the one.
Yeah. Because I was working at the Five and Dime for Mr. McGee. But yeah, I mean, Prince was an intricate part of my childhood, and I think that's really weird to say.
Let me tell you, Jason.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, Jason. I would die for you.
You would?
I would.
Well, let's go crazy, and
let's get down.
Yeah. Diamonds and pearls.
And let me also say, darling Nikki. All right, moving on from this entire bit.
So okay, now we got all the Prince song references out of the way. Prince was just
God help us when Axl Rose dies and I have to do an entire conversation in Guns N' Roses songs, which I can do. Keep going.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that one bit more. But yeah, I mean, Prince was way ahead of his time. Not only musical, but just as a personality. I mean, there was, I always think back about the Dave. Anytime I think of Prince, I always think of Dave Chappelle saying
Fuck
pancakes.
Your couch.
I always think of Dave Chappelle saying that they played basketball and he was offered pancakes.
Oh, sorry. The fuck your couch thing is Rick James, not Prince.
Yeah. We'll not admonish you, Mark.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, it was just like he was just this like little dainty dude, but he was like a badass. Like,
oh boy, is that this movie 10 times over? This little rickety, dainty man, this little fairy man, smacking the fuck out of people left and right. He was like, he's like the body of Tinkerbell and the hitting power of Mike Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me like don't make Wayne Brady choke a bitch. But yeah, he was like 5'2" or something, and like he was out there like he was like Little Mac with Mike Tyson power. But yeah, and it's really funny how Purple Rain was made because it all came about because of a record deal. He wasn't going to sign another record deal unless they gave him a movie that he wanted to star in. He wanted to be everything yet.
It was a showcase, which I'm going to talk about when I read the demographic stuff.
And he said, "Fuck it, I'll only do it if I only sign a contract and make more records if you give me a movie." And there's like, "Okay, you're Prince, sure."
Give this guy $5 million and tell him shut the fuck up. It's like $7 million.
Yeah, it's like it's like here's a passion project. Just keep making music.
Right.
And I think that when he did
die,
like,
hey Louie, cut this guy a check and get him out of my office. You crazy.
Yeah, you had the little because we're gonna go through all stereotypes. Little Jewish guy cutting him a check. But yeah, and I think when he died, a part of like musical influence died, and you see that through this soundtrack. This soundtrack is phenomenal.
Yeah, All right, let me get Shay
I
in
think
here.
it's probably one of the best soundtracks for any movie.
It's up there. I mean, it ain't no Judgment Night, but it's darn close.
I mean, it's no Fear.
Shay, I know that you were like gonna tag in Dorian. You're like, I don't know anything about this movie, but you come on, you lived on this earth. You had to have heard some of Prince's music.
What?
You had to have heard some of Prince's music.
Yeah, I have. Primarily just radio edits. I was never a huge Prince fan. That's part of why I'm transferring this over.
This is not your thing.
He's a dude.
That was questionable at time.
Tag.
All right.
And in comes Bret the Hitman Hart with the hot tag.
Here comes Arn Anderson. Hot tag.
Are you ready, my friend?
Oh, I'm ready.
Hey, Dorian. Price of whatever the hell you're calling your company these days, because this isn't Freaky Pictures anymore.
Sadly, no, but that's a whole nother story that we're not talking about right now.
No, you're not. All right. So tell me in 50 words or less all the things you love about Prince and how amazing he is.
Prince was a fantastic part of my life. As we've talked about, I'm adopted. Sorry, we've talked about it on the show before. I'm adopted. And unfortunately, and again, I'm not shitting on Prince when I say this, the woman who raised me was obsessed with Prince.
As
So I
she should
heard.
I thought she was going to say she dressed like Prince, and I was like, okay.
Keep going.
I'm out. No, seriously though. And so I spent a good chunk of my life not liking Prince out of just like, stay with me out of the fact that she liked him. But then listening to me, he was a fantastic artist. Again, gone too soon.
Yeah.
I know that's cliche, but gone too soon. I love the fact that he has always just gone to. He and David Bowie are very, very similar in the fact that they always went full on what they did, and that's Prince is fantastic, and even Symbol, artist formerly known as Prince, is still fantastic.
Sure.
And I still listen to his music to this day. I know you were talking about Little Red Corvette. That song lives rent free in my head, and I think lives rent free in pretty much everyone's head who's heard it.
I mean, she did have a pocket full of Trojans.
We're not going to review the movie. We're just going to recite Prince lyrics to each other.
Yeah, it's going to be Prince lyrics the rest of the time.
Before we go any further, by the way, I'm the kid.
Oh boy,
No.
That is what Mark calls me. He calls me kid. I am the kid.
No, you're the Prince. He's the kid.
Oh, okay.
There we go. All right, so
I'm the protocol son because Mark can't remember to say prodigal.
You know what I can remember to do? This show. Purple Rain is a 1984 American romantic smack. Take a
Do you
Kevin
feel the
Pip
love? Do you feel it?
Jesus Christ.
Kevin's Pip Hand's strong.
There were more hits in this than the average boxing match. Anyway.
I felt like I was watching Ike and Tina.
Hey now! Romantic, rock, musical, drama film scored by and starring Prince in his acting debut, and boy does it show. Developed to showcase his talents, which is not acting, it contains several concert sequences. I gotta stop there for 1 second. I'm watching this, and all I can flash back to is Robert Winfrey and Jesse Starcher whining and complaining and kvetching and carrying on about the amount of concert sequences in Luke Cage. Which, boy, if you have a hard time with that in this movie, wait till we get to DreamGirls.
Don't worry, folks. Shay Tate will be back for DreamGirls because she's got words to say.
Featuring Prince and his band, The Revolution. The film is directed by Albert Magnoli, who later became Prince's manager, from a screenplay by Magnoli and William Blinn. It also features Apollonia Cotero, Morris Day, and the Time, baby! Woo! Olga Carlatos and Clarence Williams III, the angriest man in that era of movie making. Oh my God. That guy looks at you and you feel a hand slap your face.
I didn't do it, Daddy, I swear.
Jesus Christ. I was afraid he was going to hit me, and it's God only knows how many years later, and I was watching it on television. It grossed $70.3 million worldwide against a $7.2 million budget. The film won an Academy Award, believe it or not, for Best Original Song Score. Publications and critics have regarded Purple Rain, get this, as one of the greatest musical films. In 2019, the film was selected by, and Jason loves it when I read this.
Oh, God.
Jason Teasley of the Screaming Boy podcast. Did you know that Purple Rain was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the United States National Film Registry for being, and I quote, as I often do during Black History Month, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant? Take that, white people. The film was supported with its soundtrack album of the same name, which featured 2 U.S. chart-topping singles, When the Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy, as well as the number 2 hit, Purple Rain. It is certified 13 times platinum and has sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Dorian, when we're done here, I'm going to need you to Clockwork Orange Shay to a chair and make her listen to everything Prince until she agrees. He's one of the greatest artists of all time.
Okay.
Thank you. You're
When
a good boy.
You find me a skeleton dead and standing there holding my face, just remember what you did.
I helped. That's what I did. All right, so let's get into this magnificent opus, this National Library Congress aesthetically pleasing film. So when we meet the kid, who is the prince, he and his band, The Revolution, are playing in a club, and there's a bully band, like this is high school, but that is played by Morris Day in the time. And Prince is just a struggling guy. He's fighting with his band, and he's fighting with the club owner, and life is not great. At home, speaking of fighting, Dad is beating up the mom on an ongoing basis. Along the way, he meets the character who is played by Apollonia, and they start dating, and along the way, she is drafted into the service by Morris Day in the time, which drives Prince straight up the wall. Meanwhile, he is struggling to figure out what this band is going to be and what the sound is and how they can become successful, and they are on the verge of being thrown out of this club. At some point towards the, like I said, Apollonia gets brought over to this other band. Prince doesn't like it. There's a lot of domestic violence in this movie, which leads eventually to his father nearly committing suicide with a shotgun. There's a conversation that takes place between Prince and his father about how he used to be a musician and he would compose music, but it all got away from him. After the incident with the suicide, Prince trashes the basement where his father had attempted to kill himself, and he, in doing so, finds his compositions. He takes a demo tape that the girls in his band, who he's been disrespecting, had recorded, and uses that plus his father's compositions to create Purple Rain. They perform... Go ahead.
I was like, can we just point out that in this movie, Prince is actually the bad guy?
Yes. We'll get there.
I know. I was just going to point that out early. Sucking Prince's dick, and that's fine. He's a fantastic artist, but in this movie, bad guy.
He also can't act for shit, but we'll get there. So they perform. So he composes Purple Rain, and feeling anxious about it, like how well is this going to go over with this crowd who I've already had a hard time connecting with. They perform Purple Rain, and he immediately runs out of the club like the Flash, and then he starts to hear people like cheers, like, oh wait, I've got a hit here. So he comes back out there, and because he gave credit to the girls in the band and because the crowd loves him, he has his confidence, he has found his rhythm, he has found his rhyme, and they performed 2 more songs because what this movie needed was more concert footage. And then he wins. That's the end of Purple Rain. All right, Dorian, since you just got here, what did you think of Purple Rain?
Okay, like I said, I saw this movie a lot when I was growing up, and I'm going to speak as a boy in his late 20s. First, yes, Pollyanna is fantastically hot. I mean, not as hot as my girlfriend, but again, who can be? So, again, the sex scenes, immediately grab you. The issue I had with it, and again, it's not that it's a bad movie. The people who are working behind the scenes, they're running camera, doing the lighting, they did fantastically.
Yeah.
Prince was far too up his own ass for this.
Yeah.
That being said, the reason that this movie resonates with me is because of the domestic violence. At the time I saw this movie the first time, I was watching that happen in my own life. So it resonates in the sense of like, okay, yeah, that's reality. They nailed that really well. Again, yeah, as you pointed out, Mr. Radulich, Prince is not a good actor.
Nope, not even a little bit.
They should let someone else play Prince. And again, actually, no, I wouldn't wanted him producing. If you're like, you're not being me, dude. Who wants to be you?
Could you imagine? Jason and I love to rewrite and recast movies. We just did it with The Wiz. This same movie, but Denzel Washington.
That would have been beautiful. That would have been beautiful. Actually, at the time,
Eddie Murphy.
No, even better. Are we talking about like recasting Prince himself?
Yeah.
I would say Will Smith at the time.
In the mid 80s?
He would have been young enough that it would still work. We're right on top of, I think, because
this is 84 when it comes out. I don't think he's a thing until the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, he's like, I think Will Smith is.
Keep going, Dorian. I will fact check.
No, truly, again, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air doesn't hit till the late 80s, very, very early 90s, if I remember correctly. But at the same time, the idea of a young kid trying to pull themselves out of shit and being shitty themselves, but understanding why they're shitty by the end of the movie, I think Will Smith could have done that.
It's 2 years too early. What do you got? Fresh Prince, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince don't enter the mainstream culture until 86.
Okay, sorry. The reason I thought Will Smith, and again, I'm not trying to drive us off the highway here, is that DJ Jazzy Jeff and Will Smith did that Nightmare on My Street. To Nightmare on Elm Street. So I thought maybe they were. But anyways, yeah. Again, I agree with Denzel Washington. Whole point being that no, Prince does not act well in this. He is an absolute villain. And again, I quote my girl, Michaela Wanamaker, when she's like, "It's the villain in this movie." Everyone knows that, right?
I can just imagine Mitch just like, "Hey, wait a minute!" like someone's trying to pull a fast one on her.
Like, why are we rooting for him?
Yeah,
I don't know, because he paid for the damn thing.
Yeah.
The domestic violence thing, myself is going for my career in film entertainment. This does resonate with me because of that. And I don't believe it's a good film by any stretch of the imagination. But it is it is a film that people actually worked and tried on that can still touch you. And again, I'm excited to hear what Jason has to say too.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm
excited to debate with him on this.
Jason, your thoughts on Purple Rain?
Oh, I love Purple Rain. Because one, it's a glorified awful movie. Simply because I love Prince. I mean,
Yeah.
but uh, and I love the soundtrack for it.
Yep.
But yeah, the
Jason, the shot up your nose is fantastic.
I know it's wonderful.
I'm glad to see.
I can hear him, and he isn't buzzing out. Leave him alone. I don't care.
Yeah,
I don't care.
I got one airbrush.
It's his face. It's fine.
But it's wonderful simply because it's Prince. But the acting is horrible. I mean, everybody carries him, and you can see that he is the biggest diva on set. And he had to be a diva while making this movie.
Prince is to this movie what the Ultimate Warrior was to his run in the WWF.
Yeah.
And everybody in this movie is fucking Rick Rude.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wanted that good payday because it just had Prince's name attached to it.
Sure.
But like I said, it's great soundtrack, and it's like I said, it's wonderfully awful simply because of Prince's acting. But it is also fiction because it did show the father in the as a family dynamic. We know that that's not true. We're going to talk Black history, so we know that Black fathers don't stick around after the kid's born. So,
ladies and gentlemen, everyone who's watching, do you remember the disclaimer at the start of the thing?
Yeah, this is why we have it.
I'll say it again. Welcome to Black History Month on the Radulich and Broadcasting.
Yeah,
remember you
should have heard. You should have heard our. Go back and listen to the Ike and Tina review.
Oh, the memories.
Yeah. But I mean, I felt like I was watching the sequel to Ike and Tina.
Yeah, really.
With as much as the beatings. It reminded me of that old Bill Cosby bit, "Let the beatings begin."
Then my wife makes an announcement that the beatings will now begin.
And I mean, if it wasn't for the soundtrack, this movie would be easily forgettable. This movie rests on the soundtrack because it is so iconic. It gave us, three of Prince's most iconic songs, and pretty much launched his career into the stratosphere, and made him the musical icon that we all got to know and love. So yeah, I mean, this is a part of not only film but music history that should definitely be studied and enjoyed.
So here's the sad part about it, though. Coming from my generation's point of view, we don't know a lot of those songs.
I'm going to come back to that because I want to give my thoughts on the craft of this movie. Okay?
Please, yeah. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to do
no, you're fine. Prince can't act for shit. He is all charisma. He is like I compared him to the Ultimate Warrior in a lot of ways. Like, he can't work, but boy does he have charisma for days, and he is resting entirely on that charisma. And where the charisma is failing him, he is held up by Morris Day in the Time. He is held up by Apollonia. He is held up by the guy playing his dad, Clarence Williams. My God, Clarence Williams III is awesome in this movie. He's so good. And he is doing a great job of trying to drag Prince through this vanity project.
If you don't cry, when the scene where Prince goes downstairs and his dad's playing, Clarence Williams is playing the piano, you don't have a soul.
Yeah. So there's that. Part of the problem with this movie is Prince sees himself as 6 feet tall, and he sees himself as Samuel Jackson. He ain't no Samuel Jackson. And it is like, it's like if you have like a little kid who, who thinks he's like Mike Tyson, and you're just like, it's like the TikTok meme where you flick the person and they go, wah, shut up, Jason. So anyway, moving on. Yeah, he sees himself as like this like 6 foot tall, badass lover and all this other stuff. And it's just like it's like your voice is so high, you are so tiny, and you have this great theatrical look that does not translate to badass. And so it's a weird aesthetic to say the least. The movie is entirely too long. It is 111 minutes long. This is a short film that wants to be a grown-up film, and it's not. This thing should have been like a 45 to 60-minute short film. That would have been enough. And you know how you get there? Cut down the concerts. I don't mean cut them out
this
completely.
is a basic music video.
You don't need the entire song. Some of these songs are 5 fucking minutes long. I love Prince. I hope they play Prince at my funeral in a few weeks. I mean, when it happens. But just kidding. But I'm just kidding. But yeah, I love Prince's music. I want it played, constantly. His songs are long, and they're fine being long. But Dorian, and I don't need you to speak on this, just not affirmatively that I'm right. They killed the movie dead. Because instead of providing aesthetic, you're a good boy. Instead of providing, what a soundtrack is supposed to provide, ambiance to a scene, another layer to it, the movie just stops it fucking dead.
It slammed the brakes on.
Right.
Or I was like, oh, okay, why?
And you're tight on Prince for the whole time. They don't really do like crowd shots. They do a little bit of it in the beginning to kind of give you a sense of the club. But from that point on, every time he performs on stage, you are just watching a concert film.
It's a music video that went on too long.
Yeah.
It was. I was waiting for Carson Daly to welcome us to Total Request Live.
I've seen a couple of concert films. Like I saw the Big Four. And even with the Big Four, they would cut away from Megadeth or Metallica or Anthrax or Slayer. They would show you the crowd. They would cut in backstage footage. They would do other things. Like you can't just show the concert stage.
Might I point out a better film that did this? What Purple Rain was trying to do better?
Quickly, yes, go.
The Wall.
Yeah,
Pink
The
Floyd's
Wall's a really good example of that. By the way, really, really, really quickly, has Shay ever had the experience of playing Dark Side of the Moon while The Wizard of Oz is on?
No, and
has anyone ever told her that's a thing?
No, it is a thing, and it's funny because actually everyone who's involved in Pink Floyd, again, they don't talk to each other anymore. They all hate that.
I'm sure they do. Anyway, getting back to what we're supposed to be talking about.
Yes.
I love Purple Rain, but I love Purple Rain because it's such a silly ass. It's both a silly movie, but also because Prince can't act and he's just terrible. But again, it's like what somebody with just so much charisma who can't act, and you're like, I'm amazed and horrified at the same time. Like this is a truly unique visual experience.
Well, how he treats Apollina, her character, it's like this.
Oh my god, that scene outside the lake being the best example of this.
In any other film, like if it was done modern,
mm-hmm.
he would be the villain. And we have some,
For those who have never seen it, he basically tells her, like, you'll never be a star unless you baptize yourself in the lake, in the waters of Lake Minnetonka, or whatever the fuck the name of the thing is called.
Yeah.
And then she's like, okay. She assumes that because they're in front of a lake when he says this, the implication being it's that lake. So she takes her clothes off, and we get just a tasteful shot of her bosom, and she goes into the water. And she's like, "Am I a star yet?" And he was like, "Well, that's not the real lake, you motherfucker." And then
drives off,
and then leaves this naked woman in the water and drives off. And you're like, in any other world, that's a felony. But you just
that would be like the start of like, this is our villain, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's the beginning of a horror movie. In any case, just to kind of wrap this up, the movie is held up by everybody else's performance, and it's held up by the music. The story isn't enough to fill the runtime. It is a very thin story. Now, as a cautionary tale about domestic violence and trauma, it works just fine. But if you're going to do that, this thing needed a major rewrite. They were resting entirely too much on Prince, on Prince's star power and being the lead in this movie. And they weren't touching enough on, like, just showing people getting beat up isn't really saying anything about domestic violence. Like this needed some real script doctoring. If you cut down the performances, change the shot selection so that you're getting more of the club, the other interactions, cutting to other stuff, so that the runtime is cut down.
They did kind of shoot like, especially when he's like walking in the basement. They did shoot it like it's a horror film.
Yeah, you do that, and you can beef up some of the stuff about what you're saying about domestic violence, and and change the lead. Then you actually, like, there's a good movie in there somewhere. It's just, I think that one of the reasons why Purple Rain is regarded the way it is, like I said, I read off its accolades, is one, I think everybody is distracted by how great the music is and how much charisma Prince has. Any kind of objective criticism of this movie, you're going to land where I have.
Once he gets on stage and he starts singing, because he's Prince, he's on stage. That's why he had such a wonderful career.
Right. Replace Prince with Danny DeVito. Everyone then realizes how bad this movie actually is.
Well, I know this could have been a horror movie, because if it was, it would have been 5 minutes long, because we all know the black guy gets killed off first.
Only if the director's bad.
Unless it's the blackening.
I was going to say, we kicked off Black History Month last year because I'm such a creative fellow and I'm really just a genius. What was it? The Blackening, Meet the Blacks, and Black Christmas.
Was it Black Christmas?
Yeah, it was Black Christmas. It was the new Black Christmas, not the old one. And like the poster on the Blackening,
not the good one.
Yeah, not the good one. We Can't All Die First, which is hilarious. All right. Just because, for time's sake, yes, no, and please say no. Does anyone have anything else, any burning desires about Purple Rain?
No.
I really think that, honestly, like you said it correctly, Mark, and it's kind of what I was going for too, is there's a good movie in here about domestic violence and about trying to get further in your career.
Yeah, breaking the cycle of familial domestic violence and processing your trauma in a healthy way. There's a good movie in there somewhere.
Yeah, and it just was not done this way. And again, you start off the talking about it, the same way as like Prince was like, I'm not going to do this unless I can be the lead and I can.
Yeah, there wasn't an adult around to tell Prince no.
Yeah, and that is the worst thing of anyone who has, again, because Prince has good music, he has good creative ideas, and he just didn't listen to someone going, no.
I'll tell you how you fix this movie, other than rewrite the script. Take out Morris Day and the Time. Prince and the Revolution are the bad guys.
Yeah.
And then input sexual chocolate from Coming to America.
Okay, Jason. All right. Go tag Shay back in and let's talk about DreamGirls. So I'll just get right into this because Jason's selection of this movie it's a musical. It has black people in it. So DreamGirls is a 2000, and Shay had not seen it before this, and neither have I, so there's no history to talk about here. DreamGirls is a 2006 American musical drama film written and directed by Bill Condon. If you don't know who Bill Condon is, then, well, you should. He did a lot. There's a Kiss of the Spider-Woman coming out this year. The last couple of things he's worked on were he was the writer for The Greatest Showman, which every one of you have seen. He was the director of the 2017 Beauty and the Beast. So that's where you all know him from, whether you knew that or not. He also directed Twilight, Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Part 2. He is the monster that was responsible for Kinsey, which was about Kinsey, who was, of course, a monster. He is the writer for the film of the musical Chicago. He wrote and directed Gods and Monsters, for which there's an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. He did the 1987 Sister Sister. So that is Bill Condon. You know him. You just didn't know you knew him. There we are. Adapted from the 1981 Broadway musical of the same name, DreamGirls is a film a work of fiction taking strong inspiration from the history of Motown, which I am familiar with because it's all I heard growing up in my parents' house. And its superstar act, The Supremes. You know The Supremes, you've heard The Supremes, even if you didn't know they were The Supremes. The story follows the history and evolution of American R&B music during the 1960s and 70s through the eyes of a Detroit girl group known as the Dreams and their manipulative record executive. The adaptation features an ensemble cast of Jamie Foxx, Beyonce Knowles, and Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy is a national treasure. And Jennifer Hudson, Danny Glover, Anika Noni Rose, and Keith Robinson in supporting roles. DreamGirls debuted in 4 special roadshow engagements on December 4th of 2006 before its nationwide release December 15th of 2006 with a production budget of $80 million, of which it was a fair success. DreamGirls is one of the most expensive films to feature a predominantly African-American starring cast in American film history. The film received positive reviews from critics, who particularly praised Condon's direction, the soundtrack, costume, and production design, and performances of the cast, in particular Hudson, Murphy, and was also a commercial success, grossing $155.4 million worldwide. At the 79th Academy Awards, it received 8 nominations, winning Best Supporting Actress for Hudson, which she truly deserves, Best Sound Mixing, and at the 64 Golden Globes, it won 3 awards, including Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, as opposed to The Substance, which was neither a musical nor a comedy. More on that later this year. All right, I don't want to get into like a strict plot synopsis of this thing. It'll take way too long. Just know that we meet this girl group early on. They are managed and they are touring, and then things fall apart, and they are taken over by Jamie Foxx, who is basically our big time evil record executive running this iteration of what we're calling Motown. There are marriages, there are relationships, there was falling apart. Eventually, Jennifer Hudson, who's kind of the diva in all of this and demanding, is excised from the group, and she kind of goes her own way. I think she's replaced by Beyonce. There's more success. There are more trials and tribulations. Eventually, she comes back and performs with them again. Also along for the ride is Eddie Murphy, who is kind of like a not Rick James. He's kind of like Living in America, Jason. Who am I thinking of? James Brown.
James Brown.
He's kind of like a James Brown analog, or maybe Curtis Mayfield, I think his name is, that kind of a thing. We kind of follow him for a while. There's more, but it's a long movie. That's probably why I'm struggling with trying to sum this up as best
It's
I can.
super long.
Yeah, this is 2 hours and 10 minutes, and my girlfriend's exact response to this was a snooze. And while I enjoyed the movie, yeah, this can be a bit of a slog to get through. I'm gonna say this, and then I'll throw it over to Shay. I like the movie, but I like the movie because I'm interested in how, a very iconic and sort of staple of American culture, specifically American Black musical culture that has been with us since then and is continuing to influence music today, whether you realize it or not, kind of sort of came to be. It's a weird musical in that I didn't that for the first third of the movie, anything that had to do with the music was on stage. And it isn't until Jennifer Hudson finally has enough of what's going on and kind of erupts and wants to leave the group that I realized, oh, they're gonna sing talk to each other like you do in a musical. That is way into this movie when that happens. Like, oh my God, that's what this is. So it was a weird transition, and it was like that they waited that long into the movie to do that kind of weirded me out. Because then they keep doing it.
I actually do have some commentary on that because
go ahead.
This is a very theater person's movie.
Okay, tell me what that means.
It is made by people who have some very intimate knowledge of how theater works, of theatrical history.
Well, it is done by the guy who did Chicago and Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, and it is very much this is a film that was made to get theater people very excited. And part of that is actually in the pacing of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that they did the first third of this film, where the only music that they were playing was on stage, is actually because that is how musical movies started. It was the Bing Crosby and the Elvis films. That was the musical. It was a road trip where the only time that the actors sang was when they were performing on stage.
Oh gosh, my ex-wife's like favorite Christmas movie does a lot of that. Shit.
White Christmas.
That's the one.
Yeah. And it actually it does a really brilliant transition, because what it does is it transitions from that period of time into the 1950s spectacle musical movie. And then as they move into the 1970s, it moves into what we know of as the modern musical movie.
Which is half of the dialogue is. I don't know if you've seen Amelia Perez yet. We talked about it. Robert and I, it drove him right up the wall. But we talked about how like scenes will start off in normal dialogue and they will suddenly slip into a song and you don't even realize it's happening. It's like being choked by a snake.
Yeah.
And I liked about it.
Oh yeah, and I absolutely loved it, and I thought that it was a really fun little detail that you could potentially miss if you haven't paid attention to a lot of like the really early musical movies.
Okay, that's really good, Shay. Something I didn't know. By the way, have you seen Amelia Perez yet?
I have not.
You have Netflix. You should. Get some culture in your life. God damn it! What are you doing here? Listen, I will throw it over to Jason in just a second. Say, I wish this had been shorter. 2 hours and 10 minutes is a little long for this sort of thing. I don't know why we seem to think musical and let's make it 5 hours. I have the same problem with Wicked. But I think you tighten this up a bit, and I think you've got a much more fulfilling, interesting story. Jennifer Hudson is so good, and I made the joke earlier, like I am accidentally becoming a fan of hers because I didn't watch American Idol, and I really didn't follow the woman. I didn't know anything about her until we watched Aretha, and I'm like, oh my god, she's amazing. And then I didn't know she was in this. I just kind of it made the list because Jason said throw it on the list, and so I watched it cold. I didn't look up anything about it. And she's so good. Like my comment about Cynthia Erivo from Wicked was she can sing and she can act. She can't sing and act at the same time. I said the same thing of the star of The Little Mermaid from a few years ago. I actually just had to make this point to my coworkers. The girl is pretty as a peach. She can sing, she can act. What she can't do is both at the same time. And then you have Jennifer Hudson, who should be teaching a master class in singing and acting at the same time. Beyonce Knowles is better than I thought. Is the best thing I've ever seen her in, because she's another one who struggles with acting. She kind of gets by on her looks and her singing, and her charisma. But here she's really good.
Illuminati.
The Illuminati. Shut up. The last thing I'll say is Jamie Foxx is an underrated actor. I don't think he gets a lot of credit because people he does things like Electro in Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves for the performances that he gives, but he is an extraordinarily good actor and definitely carries his role very well in this movie. I like the music, but I liked Motown. I grew up with it. Saturdays in my house were cleaning the house and listening to my mother's, cousin Brucey, WCBS FM, or Motown records or Elvis or, that kind of stuff. So like this hit me where I lived as a child and I liked it. I just wish it had been shorter. Jason?
Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, Jennifer Hudson is phenomenal. I'm, like you said, Mark, I became a fan of her last year when we did the Aretha Franklin story. She has such a powerful voice and just such a presence to pull off some of the things. I think she would have been a superstar back in the Motown era.
Mm-hmm.
That's why she plays a lot of these Motown icons, is because she can channel that and not only bring that charisma, but the powerful voice to the scenes, the songs too. I agree. This movie could have been cut down to a good hour 45 would have been my limit.
Yeah.
Because I started about the hour 45 mark. I started just like, how much longer do I got to go and stuff. A lot of filler in here.
Yeah.
Jamie Foxx is phenomenal. We'll be talking more about him next week as well when we cover any given Sunday and Willie Beeman. But I became there's two roles Jamie Foxx made me fall in love with his acting. One being Collateral, opposite of Tom Cruise. The other was Ray. Neither one of you have seen Ray. I highly recommend seeing it because Jamie Foxx does an amazing job as Ray Charles.
Yep.
And for Jennifer Hudson to stand out in this star-studded cast, and she was fairly young, and to not only have that presence on screen with all these icons, but to be awarded for it speaks volumes to her acting and her presence itself. So yeah, the only thing that I say is they could have cut it down to about an hour 45, and this movie would have been perfect.
Shay, take me home, baby doll. What do you think of Dreamgirls? Was this also the first time you'd ever seen it?
Yes, this was the first time I had ever seen it, and I actually went in with a very different idea of what it was supposed to be, because Dorian had warned me that it might fall under the Shay doctrine, which is it is beautiful and it is important, and I hated it. But it actually ended up being something that I really loved. It is very much a theater person's musical. Like I said before, it's got the pacing references to the different styles of musical theater throughout the years. I absolutely loved the Motown. I did not grow up with any kind of Motown or anything in my life. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. A lot of it was classic rock and country music until I was like 13 when I started getting into emo and
well, I don't know if you know this or not, but Jason and I are soul brothers.
Yeah, she grew up as a Carry On My Wayward Son.
Yeah.
It's by Kansas.
We got it. Keep going, Shay.
But this was a really beautiful musical. I absolutely loved the music in it. The sets were spectacular. The costuming was absolutely on point. It was 100% correct for each of the time periods that it was happening in, and it was absolutely fantastic. And it was nowhere near as heavy as I thought it was going to be. It's very much an interpersonal drama about all of these people that are working in show business.
Right.
And yeah, there are things that are happening around them, but that's really not the focus of the film. The focus of the film is these people and their talent and the problems that arise from that, and also how shitty Jamie Foxx's character is.
Yeah.
And I thought it was honestly really fantastic. It probably was a little bit long, but I also didn't notice it nearly as much. Coming from someone who has worked backstage at musicals for 10 plus years, 4 hours for a live musical is honestly not that bad.
You get an intermission, and it's a different beast.
Exactly. You get an intermission with a movie. You don't get that intermission,
right?
And I feel like some of that was a little bit of a lost in translation, where they were trying to make it seem very much like a live show.
Also, musicals have two denouements.
Yes.
And that's the problem with this film, is that it just keeps going. It keeps going. This is like baking bread. It just goes on and on and on and on. And then you just, by the time
it never ends.
Yeah, and then by the time it's over, you're like, you need. I like what you're saying about, like, this is like a theater person's movie. The problem is they don't really give you the theater experience because it's a film. Kind of like what I was saying about Purple Rain. I don't know if you got to hear the discussion, but there were some of this where film and theater, just like film and books, are not the same thing, and they have to be treated differently.
Yeah, and again, there was some translation lost in here, which I think is a little bit odd because I don't think this was a live show before the movie was made. I don't think this is based off of anything that was on Broadway.
The 1981 Broadway musical of the same name.
Oh, okay. So it was based off of a musical.
Yes, very much so.
I guess I just hadn't ever heard of the DreamGirls musical.
Neither did I until we did this podcast, lady. So, all right. Anything else about DreamGirls before we close out for the night?
I do have to say I didn't really like Eddie Murphy in this.
Oh, you're killing me, kid. I had such nice things I was going to say to you when this was over, and now I'm taking them all back. Eddie Murphy is a saint. You don't besmirch the good goddamn name of Eddie. My girlfriend didn't like him either. It's fine.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem was that he wasn't playing anyone other than himself. And it kind of took me out of it, specifically when his character was on screen, because I've seen Eddie Murphy in some other stuff, and I do think he's funny when he's playing Eddie Murphy, but I've seen other things where he's not playing Eddie Murphy and he's fully capable of playing another character.
My name is Dolomite.
I'm going to offer a counterpoint to that. I think Eddie Murphy is doing James Brown, and I think James Brown's personality is a lot of people's personality, especially in show business.
Okay, that's very likely. I know of James Brown, but I have not done any research on him, so I don't know if that's what he was actually like. Or...
I'm going to send you the Metal Hammer of Doom extra Jesse and I did when we reviewed the Rocky IV soundtrack. And James Brown, I don't know if you've ever seen Rocky IV, but James Brown does a live performance of Living in America. First of all, it's one of the funniest things I've ever done with Jesse. But if you want to capture the essence of who and what James Brown was, you have to see him doing Living in America. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, but you didn't love Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, like Eddie Murphy was kind of the weakest part of the film for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I also I love spectacle films and like anything to do with old Hollywood and shit like that. I also really love.
Have you seen Babylon yet?
I have not.
Oh my God! If you have Paramount Plus, when we're done here, go watch Babylon, and you'll thank me in the morning, especially after the elephant. Never mind. You'll just watch it. Tell Mark sent you. You'll like Hollywood and spectacle. Oh boy.
Tell Large Marge sent you.
That's right, Jason. Any final words here about DreamGirls? If not, we're gonna start to close out because I have an appointment at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to get out of here too. 4 a.m. comes awful early.
Yes,
Oh
sir.
no, I mean, DreamGirls is a fine film. Definitely something to look into, especially if you want that Motown history. Pair this with, or if you're just on a Jennifer Hudson kick, pair this with with Respect, and spend a good afternoon, admiring Jennifer Hudson's acting performances as well as her singing. But highly, I would recommend it if you want that Motown history lesson.
Well, folks, that is our triple feature focusing on Afrocentric musicals, The Wiz, Purple Rain, and DreamGirls. Guys, this was one of the better podcasts I've done in recent history. I really enjoyed this discussion, guys, so I appreciate you both.
Yeah.
I still hate you, Mark.
I understand. Anyway, this man who hates me is going to be on 3 more podcasts with me this month. We are taking a break. Just as things get started, we take a break because we have to deal with the Super Bowl. So next week, our Super Bowl show, it is myself and Jason and Dorian in theory, and we will be talking Wildcats, Draft Day, and Any Given Sunday. As I've been telling people, Wildcats was one of my favorite football movies growing up because I wasn't parented. Then we are back.
And don't drop me because I'm worth $1 million.
Then we are back celebrating Afrocentric film, Black history, with a focus on Black basketball movies. We are doing this was all Jason. We're doing Above the Rim, Coach Carter and He Got Game. That is February 13th. February 20th. We are looking at John Singleton movies, the ones we haven't already talked about. Poetic Justice, Higher Learning, I Wanted to Be an Engineer, and Baby Boy, which I have avoided like the plague, and I am only doing it because of this podcast. That is again Jason, Dorian, and I. And then we conclude Black History Month with our actor focus. This time it is the aforementioned Samuel Jackson. We are doing one of the great features in cinema history, just a cultural icon, a movie that really shows us an appreciation for film. Snakes on a Plane, The Great White Hype. The Great White Hype, one of my favorite movies, and Soul Men, baby. Samuel L. Jackson, national treasure, God's favorite son. Speaking of God's favorite son, earlier this week, myself and Harry Broadhurst put the band back together, and we are the Indie-siders, and we are looking at pro wrestling, and we talked about CM Punk, and we talked about the Royal Rumble and Saturday Night's Main Event, but we also reviewed The People versus GCW. That was fun. Monday, continuing to look at the Best Picture Oscar nominations, myself and a beleaguered, bewildered, and bewitched Robert Winfrey. We talked about Conclave, A Complete Unknown, and The Brutalist, speaking of 4-hour movies. Last night, myself and Alexis Haina, under her leadership, talked The Bear, Season 1. We mostly talked about cooking food, but somewhere in there was a conversation about The Bear. This Sunday, I am going on Jesse's podcast, Source Material is what they call it, and we are talking Dan Slott's The She-Hulk, 2004 and 2005. Damn You Hollywood is back Monday. We'll be talking Companion, which is already getting buzzed as one of the best movies of the year. So that's good. It's nice to see something good for a change. So, speaking of something good for a change, Robert Winfrey's favorite movie ever. Wallace and they're doing a Damn You Hollywood. It'll be him, Zach, and Alexis. They're talking Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Foul. They can all have fun with that. And that is it for this week. Shay, when are you back? Let's see. When is Shay Tay back? Shay. Much later this year, unless you decide to jump on something. So I'm not even going to bother. Jason had to bug off. His iPad died. But you just heard all the Jason shows that are coming up. So Shay, go ahead and tell people what you do and where they can find you.
All right. I am Shay Tate with Tate FX. You can find me on primarily on Facebook. I also work a good chunk with Dorian Price. So if you contract him for anything, you're probably going to get a makeup artist along with it. I don't currently have any upcoming projects, primarily because I am doing some prep work so that I can get down to Pittsburgh, because I am planning on attending the Tom Savini School for Makeup Effects.
Oh, good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm sure something will tickle your fancy between now and September. So, which is when your next show is. So we'll figure out when you're going to come back. But I want to say thank you again to Shay and Jason. This has been a fun show. And thank you all for watching tonight. Triple feature. Be well, be safe, and behave.